Hello, in this video I'm going to access a web service from an Android app. Alright, so what I'm going to review is initially some research we did last year in the project. We accessed a web service which gave us back some golf tournaments, and then we had them implemented in an Android app. So we accessed the web service and loaded this here recycler view with any tournaments which were coming from the web application. So this is currently turned on as of February 7th, 2018, and the web service is providing three golf tournaments here showing up in this list. All right, so this is sort of just a test application, so it's not really formatted up nicely or anything, but basically it has the code needed in order to get this populated. Okay, so I've opened up the project which this came from. Is from last year, so 2016-2017 research. I'll bring it up here. So the research under there, it's called client server, and inside there is an Android app. There's some documentation here. Excuse me. Some documentation you can read over, and there's a client server, which is the Android app that accesses the web service. Excuse me. Okay, so that's in there. This is in addition to this year's client server, which was done for us, and it provides us information on how to implement the login and access the login web service for our court bookings. But this here might be useful as well because it provides an array of tournaments back, and which is used to populate that recycler view. Okay, so I'm going to look at the code here. So inside Android Studio, I've opened up the test client server app, right, from this here repository. And you'll see that there's a package here called testclientserver.util, and it has 4 classes in it. So these 4 classes provide the functionality needed in order to connect to the web server. So these can be used with some modifications. Obviously, we don't want a tournament as our Java object. We're going to use probably court bookings. And for the example that I did, I used user class. So what I did was connected to the court booking application to get a list of all the users for that application. Okay, so I'm going to take a look at some of these classes in particular. All right, so the tournament, all right, this is just going to be a basic Java class. Right, it's getter setters, equals method, toString, usual, and some attributes. Okay, so whenever you're going to modify this, so I'll demo it in a minute, but you're going to have to create your own class. So if you're viewing bookings in your project, in SAM there's already a booking class available to you, right? So there's a news item sent out with a booking class, so you could use that, make some modifications to it if you need to, but it should have the attributes needed for a booking. Okay, so the next 2 are connection and connection util classes. So let's just take a look at what they do. All right, so there's some functionality in here. All right, for this application, we wanted to get the tournaments, from the web service. So we created, or somebody created, a get tournaments method, which returns a string. So this is going to return the JSON, which comes back from the web service. All right, so it accepts the context, so that'll be passed from our main activity. It would be calling this somewhere. Here it is, get tournaments, and passes the application context to it. Okay, so after that, we've got some stuff in here. You'll notice connectivity manager is used, and we want to check the connectivity. Basically what we're doing here is seeing if we're connected to the network. All right, so in order to get that to work, you're going to have to add the permission. So you want to be able to check if you're connected to the internet. You want to be able to access network state. Right? And we're also going to be accessing the web service. So you're going to want to make sure these two entries are added to your manifest file. Notice it's outside of the application tag. Okay, so the get tournaments is going to check if it is connected or connecting, so that's okay. If we are connected, we create a new connection. And this is just the way the class was set up. It accepts tournaments. So if we go look at the connection class, where the constructor is here, it calls this method. All right, so the link is going to be, ultimately we want a URL which is going to connect to the web service. All right, so the get link, we look down at that method. Here what it does, it's set up. So if I want to get the tournaments, this returns me the URL link to go get the tournaments. All right, so it's a little bit different for our apps. All right, so if you want to go look at the court booking, if you go to courtbooking/rest/API, this gives you the web services which are available for the court booking application. All right, so if I want all the bookings by user ID, I call this here /bookings/user ID, right, and this here URL would have it. So if I just paste this in, see this gives me back the bookings for user 1. There they are. So it's a JSON array containing a bunch of JSON strings representing each booking. All right, so you'll notice this, if it has tournaments, it gives back this, or tournament/upcoming, this, or tournament/players, this. But if it doesn't find that, it just returns back the URL that was passed to it. So you can just do that. So you could just, in this case, if I wanted, well, whenever I get over to my example app, if I just paste in the URL to go get the bookings right here, or the users, or whatever URL or web service I want to hit, that will set me up to connect to that web service. All right, the rest of the code, the execute will just run, and the results will be returned. Okay, so this here method can be modified, and I'll show you that later. Okay, so that's basically all there is to it. If you want to look at it a little bit closer, what it does, it makes an HTTP URL connection to that link to the web service, sets up the some information for it. It actually does the connect. All right, then it sets up a reader, reads through the JSON that gets passed back, puts it out as a string, and ultimately returns the string, which is the JSON. All right, so you notice this here ultimately returns the string as well. So over my main activity, whenever I call this method, the string, the JSON string containing all the tournaments gets passed back here. You'll notice that there's a little toast pop up whenever this starts. If I shut it down, and I go back to the tournaments. Which one is it? Test client server. If I rerun that, notice it makes its connection. There's the toast with the JSON containing all the tournaments. All right, so the next part is to work with the recycler view. So once I get the JSON back, what I want to do is take that information and add it to a recycler view. All right, so how this works, if you look in your layout, my activity main, which corresponds to this here, that has a recycler view on it. So here it comes. I just look at the text. All right, there's my recycler view. All right, so there's not much to it. But this is mostly set up in the code. All right, so I've got the recycler view, and then I create this adapter class, which is a tournament adapter. All right, let's take a look at that class. What that does, that sets us up. All right, so I've got a list of tournaments as an attribute, so I need a corresponding list of users or bookings, whatever you're trying to show. My example is going to be users. All right, and the rest of it. All right, so there's text views for name and start date. They correspond to name. For the first one is CIS Fox Meadow Classic, and then the date. So those are the only two attributes which are being displayed on this recycler view. And the recycler view is this, it's sort of like a list, but each element, each list item is its own layout. All right, so back to the adapter here. Right, so I've got a couple attributes. I associate the text views that are on the layout. All right, so what they are is this tournament list view. You see there's only two things on it. There's the name and the start date. All right, so those are obtained here. If you click on one of the entries, you just get a little toast pop up, which we can try. All right, tournament adapter constructor sets the list up here. And all right, so some of this stuff is just specific to a recycler view, and just the syntax you need in order to associate the elements in the array list with the elements on the recycler view. All right, so I'm going to put the viewholder.name. So I'm going to set that to be the tournament name coming from the element of the array list. All right, I'll do that for each attribute. All right, so if you have more than two, you'll have to have more entries here. All right, so another thing that can be used, the tournament ID is, I think it says here, setting the tournament ID in a final attribute can then be used in the on-click listener to know which tournament is clicked. All right, so I'm setting the final int tournament ID, getting it for each tournament. So this here is going to run for each element of the array list. All right, so you see I've got a on-click listener, which has the text here, which is whenever I'm setting what is going to come up whenever you click on any element of the recycler view. So if I click on the first one, click 1, click 2, click 3. So the tournament ID is 1, 2, and 3 associated with each of those elements. All right, so it's something you might want to do, right? You might want to set up an action to happen whenever they click on one of those rows. Maybe you need to get like the primary key, because once you click on one of those rows, you might use the primary key to go to the database. If you have it locally, or if you have an array list stored here in Java, to go get the element from the array list based on that primary key. All right, so we don't need to go too far with this. You just need to be able to get stuff set up on your recycler view. Okay, so that's the tournament adapter, or booking adapter, or user adapter, based on whatever kind of data you're going to show on your screen. All right, so I've got a recycler view set up. So this here is going to be pretty boilerplate. It's going to be exactly the same for each of our activities. All right, the next thing I do is I go get the JSON. All right, using the connection util class that we looked at earlier. This here is just a debugging thing to pop up for a minute. All right, and then I use JSON. All right, so I'm going to use JSON to get the objects from from the JSON string that came back. All right, so if you want to use JSON, you have to remember you need to have the entries in your build.gradle. Last semester we used Maven. We had put entries in our pom.xml file. This semester in Android Studio, we're using the Gradle build tool. And so you'll notice here, there's these entries at the bottom. So what you want to do is add these to your dependencies. All right, so just put those in exactly as they are. You'll get 2.3.1 of JSON. You'll also want to bring these here two entries as well, because we're working with a recycler view. Okay, so JSON, I use this here method to get me. All right, so I'm passing back. I need to pass in the tournament JSON, which is an array of JSON strings. You can tell that whenever you hit it. All right, you see there's the array, and inside the array is a bunch of JSON strings. Okay, and then that gives me, so this is you need to pass the tournament class so that the JSON knows how to map the JSON to a tournament class object, and that's going to give me back an array of tournaments. So it just works. JSON handles that nicely. And then what I do is I just convert the array to add each element of the array to the tournament list. And this here was just some testing. Don't need that. And then we call this method madapter for the recycler view adapter .notify dataset change. So this allows the tournament adapter to know that something has changed and to update it on the screen. Okay, so there's quite a bit of stuff there, but that's it. That's all the code that's needed to set this up, to connect to the web service, come back with JSON, convert the JSON to an array list of objects, and associate those objects with the recycler view. All right, so in another repository, which is 2017-2018 class activities, I've added this module number 12. All right, and it's got a fragment app. And what I did was I modified our fragment app that we've been working with before to have this implemented. So whenever this app runs, it will show the users coming from our court booking app. Alright, so you see this should look very similar to what we just looked at. If I look at the layout, I've got content main. Alright, so I get rid of the, in this case, I get rid of the list view and the fragment that used to be on here, and instead I'm just showing the recycler view, and that's going to show all the users from our app. Alright, so if you follow this through, you'll notice corresponding changes. Right, everything is virtually the same. I've got a recycler view, I've got a user adapter, and I've got a list of users instead of a list of tournaments. So you need this change. All right, and then basically I just refactored that code. I brought it in from the other app. All right, and down here I've got the code, which is identical pretty much. I mean, there's the corresponding changes from tournament to users, but it's virtually the same. So I created a get users method. Very similar. I passed in my web service to give me back all the users from our application. Right. It builds it, returns me a JSON string. Right. Toast that JSON string just to see it. And then I set up my recycler view. You notice I associate the M adapter, I set it to a new user adapter. And this is identical to the tournament adapter, except it has a list of users instead of a list of tournaments. Right? I should carefully go through this and make all the modifications. And notice that I want to see I'm showing 4 attributes. Right? So I've got in my my layout for this one. If I look at my user list view, all right, so I've got 4 elements to display: user ID, username, first name, and last name. You'll notice I just have things a little bit different size. I've got the first name being really big. And that's what you can control how each row looks by making modifications to this class. Now I have it set up as a linear layout. I don't know if that didn't come up yet, still building. But you can add whatever you want into this layout. If you want lines or some decorations, whatever you want, change the colors. Right. All right, so I'm still moving down here. You'll see just the changes. Nothing changed here. Right. I get back user JSON. I use JSON to get an array of users. I loop through and build up my array list of users, and then I notify that the adapter that the data set has changed. Right, and that's it. So if that comes up, eventually, if the build completes, you should be able to see a list of users coming from the court booking app instead of the tournament app. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to, if you want to set this up, you'll set up these 4 classes. Right, you modify, your main activity has to change, and your layouts have to change. Where you want to show the recycler view, you have to put it on an activities layout. And then what you're going to have is a user list view, which contains the layout for each row. So you have to make that modification. Only other change is your build.gradle. You have to make sure you add these 3 dependencies and your Android manifest. You need to add these 2 permissions. All right, I'm going to let that finish building, and then I'll come back and show it working, and then we'll wrap up there for this video. Okay, so we're back. You'll notice that the app has completed deploying, so it's open now, and it's obtained the information from the web service. There's BJ, Mark, Frank, Jordan, Keith, and Fernand. And it's not the prettiest kind of layout, but you could set up your layout to look the way you want. So anyway, give that a try. You should be able to get your client server set up. Not a large amount of code, but several spots where you have to make changes. So let me know if you have any questions, and good luck with it.